Well, let's talk to someone who can shed some light on this for us, because our guest tonight is a senior fellow at the Centre for Independent Studies. Robert Carling has a particular focus on federalism, taxation and fiscal policy. Before starting with the CIS, he was an executive director with the New South Wales Treasury. Welcome to the panel, Robert Carling.
Thank you, Julia.
Is the COAG system fundamentally flawed?
I think it is. It is built on the premise of cooperative federalism. I mean, there are two ways you can go with federalism, basically. Cooperative federalism and competitive federalism. And Kevin Rudd, 5 years ago, was pushing cooperative federalism, but this has turned out in practice to be just a continuation of what went before. But
he did have some success with health, is that not right?
Well, there was limited success with health, but by and large it has been a continuation of the so-called blame game, which he said had to stop through cooperative federalism.
Whose fault is that? Whose fault is the end of the failure of the blame game to end?
I don't think that you can point the finger at any person. I think the concept is flawed, and we would be far better off with a system of competitive federalism where there are clearer divisions of responsibility between the Commonwealth and the states. Take education, school education, for example. Not so long ago, the Commonwealth had nothing to do with public school funding of public schools. It was strictly a state responsibility. The Commonwealth is now involved. Are we any better off as a result of that?
Robert, are you saying the Commonwealth should have no involvement in schools? Because if you are, I agree with you.
Yes, that is what I'm saying, exactly.
The states have managed it very well for years, and they, as you're suggesting, compete against each other. Queensland for years spent less on school education than the rest of Australia and had school outcomes that were pretty much the same. Now, the other states learnt something from that. I suppose education advocates would be upset at what the other states learnt. But the idea of people who are close to the decision makers electing them is terribly good. I don't know why we have a Department of Education, school education in Canberra. You could almost, although there are certain national health issues to do with immunisation and food standards and so on, I'm not sure why we have a Department of Health.
Somebody's got to hand out the money to the private schools, don't they, Peter?
Oh, that's the other thing, Robert. You said the Commonwealth should have no involvement in public schools. Do you also believe they should have no involvement in private schools?
Well, that has a longer history.
Yeah, well, it's
Peter,
not that long,
give him the chance to respond, Peter. Now, let me just overall ask you the question, though. When you're talking about we need a clearer understanding and a clearer division of responsibilities, are you, in fact, saying that the state should have greater power and responsibilities? Are you talking about an encroachment from the Commonwealth?
Yes, the state should be more accountable. They should be more responsible for raising the money to spend on their resresponsibilities, with less involvement by the Commonwealth Government.
And which areas?
The same applies in health.
Yes.
Health and school education are the main examples, but there are others.
Okay.
But we've reached this point through decades of Commonwealth encroachment on state responsibilities.
All of which has been signed off by the High Court in decisions about the reach of the Commonwealth's constitutional powers. What are you proposing? Some sort of popular uprising against the Commonwealth's taxation and corporations powers? And who's going to lead that sort of popular movement? It sounds a little bit hard to get excited about.
Well, if we had some leaders who are more concerned about these issues, then they could lead the way. Lead the way in this direction.
But the reality is, you would have to curtail
to do this in the past.
Like what?
Bob Hawke was interested in it for a time, and that was derailed by Keating when he became Prime Minister. Howard had the GST reform, which didn't go far enough. So starts have been made in the past, but it has never been followed through.
Well, so let me ask
you. We need leaders who are interested in genuine competitive federalism.
Right. Okay, so what you're proposing is a very substantive debate, you know, with
Yes.
fundamental legal changes, you know, from a basic different philosophy. Let's talk about the COAG that we've got now.
Yes.
And let's assume that we can just basically reform or tinker or adjust to the current system to try to make it more productive. Is the case that, as former New South Wales Premier Bob Carr and Nick Greiner have said, they've just got too much to do? That 60 subject areas, for example, should be reduced to 6. Is there any truth in that?
Well, yes, COAG agendas are ridiculously long, but that is a byproduct of the system that I've been criticising. If you are going to have Commonwealth state entanglement in so many subject areas, then it is inevitable that they are going to have these long, complex agendas and a lot of disputation.
Right. So what do you think will be happening tomorrow?
Well, I suspect that some states will sign up on the school funding proposal. Western Australia clearly won't, and a couple of the others will probably hold out. The 30th of June has been set as the deadline by the Prime Minister. They will probably hold out and hope for something better.
And with all of these dissent and voices criticising the COAG system as it stands, is anything actually going to happen? Is there any momentum around this?
Well, I don't think that it's going to achieve very much, no.
All right, well, look, thank you very much for joining us on the Joe. I'm Robert Carling from the Centre of Independent Studies.